Alright, welcome back to Nintendo Week. I am your host, Colin McIsaac, joined as always by Alex Plant.
The Gritty Reboot.
And Ben Limereau.
The Not Gritty Reboot.
And this week's discussion segment is our very first Mystery House. You lovely listeners have been sending me your questions through email, so we are going to take some time to answer them. I'm the only one of the three of us who's seen these questions beforehand, so to Alex and Ben, they're a total mystery. So just to give them some time to think about their responses, I'll give my answers first, and then we'll move on to whoever's next. So, let's get started. The first question comes from Kira. Kira asks, do you think the Wii U could reach the mainstream more as an art device or a creative device than a gaming system? I mean, if Nintendo launched applications or games such as RPG Maker or a 3D modeling tool with Art Academy Home Studio to attract artists or game designers, if those applications can be used as a learning tool, do you think that the Wii U would have a bigger chance of reaching the mainstream a bit more? My response is, I don't think so, because those are both, I think, inherently niche audiences, so using those to capture the mainstream doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think they could use those to reach more people, just period, but I don't think it would be a mainstream audience, and I also don't think Nintendo is particularly inclined to do something like release RPG Maker on Wii U. Their business is making games mostly, not making art tools and game creation tools. Although with Super Mario Maker, I don't know.
I have a question and an answer. How is Kira spelled in that person's name?
Kira, but that's her nickname.
I'm going to assume that's a Death Note reference, and this is my favorite listener now. So, if you're listening, Kira, you are awesome. As for the answer to your question... Yeah, that's the main character of Death Note, Light Yagami. His nickname is Kira.
Awesome.
In answer to your question, I don't really think that putting art programs or game-making programs on Wii U would attract that many people, just because there's already similar programs like that on tablets, and way more people own tablets or are inclined to pick up tablets than they are Wii U. And so when there's already cheap or even free apps like that available on just a much more common piece of hardware, I don't see how that would really give Wii U much of an advantage.
Yeah, it's sort of a weird place that they're in, because in the past when games like this, like Art Academy, have been released, they've been released on platforms that were already popular, and so they were able to sell to people who already owned the platform, but I don't think they were really selling the platforms. So it certainly won't increase Wii U's visibility with the mainstream. As for game-making tools, I'm kind of inclined to think that any user-generated content experiences that Nintendo puts out just haven't done very well, and so putting out more is not going to help them either. Mario Maker is getting a lot of attention this year, but I think Mario Maker is also this sort of extraordinary version of a user-generated content game, in the sense that Mario has lots of content that it is drawing on. But I don't think some kind of generic game maker will do very well, because I don't think things like that have traditionally sold on consoles, period, the end.
Wow, that was a very curt ending. So the next question comes from Wade. He asks, is there a game or show or book or anything that you like a lot but doesn't seem to have much of a following? My answer for you, Wade, is obviously the Mother series. Although we talk about that so much, I'm sure that's a horribly disappointing answer, so I'll give you something better. In the early 2000s, Nintendo made a bunch of games for the Game Boy Advance. They were licensed games for Hamtaro. This was a children's anime. It was about a bunch of hamsters who they all, when their owners were like off at school, they would like get together in this tree house, and it was super cute. And it was popular around that same time. I really loved it, and I picked up the games, and I was amazed by the fact that these were licensed games, and they were actually really, really good. And of course they were really good, because Nintendo developed them. Believe it or not, I don't know what business Nintendo had developing licensed games, but they did, and they were great, and I loved them then, and I still play them every now and then. Now they're kind of short, but they're still fantastic games. So the Hamtaro games for Game Boy Advance, I'm a big fan, and obviously just not a whole lot of people know about them.
Yeah, just put on the spot here, Mother was also the franchise that immediately jumped to my mind, just because it, only one game was ever released outside of Japan, and it sold so terribly in Japan as well. Obviously it's great to see that getting a lot more notice, and especially in the West now. I can't really think of another franchise just right off the top of my head that I think deserves more love.
Boo.
Boo.
Yeah, I'm sort of in this weird place where most of the franchises I follow are actually pretty well known, but there's some really small one-off games that I got into on DS. My favorite one is this game called Ninja Town, which is a licensed game based on a plushie line. I forget what the company was that makes it. but it's a really light strategy game where you build your little ninja houses and you fight with these adorable ninjas against these evil demons, and you use ninja star cookies to power up and ninja magical powers to fight them, and it was just really fun. I had a really nice multiplayer mode. It was actually pretty challenging too, but like little one-off games like that you kind of have never heard of, but you find out about them through the grapevine and you try them out and they surprise you, but then you never hear from them again because they don't get made into franchises. Those are kinds of those are my favorite sort of niche unknowns.
Nice. So the next question here comes from Hassan. Hassan asks, what is your favorite Nintendo game of all time? Come on, man. I can't answer that.
Are we talking like Nintendo exclusive or Nintendo published and developed? What?
I don't know. He doesn't specify, but I would go with Nintendo developed / published. Maybe Paper Mario 2, maybe Pokemon Gold, maybe Tropical. I don't know. It's too hard. I can't.
Lame.
Could be Mother 3 though.
I'm gonna go with. I really love the Super Nintendo era, so I'm gonna go with a toss-up between Earthbound and A Link to the Past.
Okay, cool.
I have the totally original answer of Ocarina of Time.
No, I mean, it's a good choice.
It's just one of those standouts where, it was in the middle of Nintendo's sort of awkward transition to 3D, where not all their franchises were necessarily the same that they were before, but Zelda was. Zelda was definitely...
Nintendo's awkward high school years.
Nintendo was definitely making a Zelda game when they made Ocarina of Time. And it was a great Zelda game. It was my first, so I guess I'm a little biased, but...
You always remember your first.
As a runner-up, I'm also going to toss Metroid Fusion onto the list. I adore that game. I have to break it out and beat it again at least once a year. Just yesterday, I finished 100%ing it again.
Wow.
So, love it.
You're a better Metroid fan than I.
The next question comes from James. James says, I'm 2 episodes behind, so forgive me if this has been discussed recently. It hasn't. But what do you guys think is up with Nintendo's quality of life initiative? I know they said somewhat in passing that they wouldn't be discussing it at E3, but it hasn't even really ever been referenced in many, many months. Well, I feel like NX stuff is mentioned quite often. Do you think it's still happening? Do you think whatever it is will be significant in any way? It's obviously still happening. They wouldn't just abandon something like that. But I also think that, as for whether it'll be significant, this is a completely new foray into a tech space that no one else has explored. This is a completely brand new concept by Nintendo. And I think that there is certainly potential there, and especially given Nintendo's experience with making entertainment out of things like health. You know, if you look at the success of Wii Fit, which sold just brilliantly, I think they can bring their experience in making entertainment experiences out of just, living healthy lifestyles, which sounds insane, but they've done it before. I think that it does have the potential to be significant. We'll have to see what the tech is like, and I think it depends largely on that, on whether the tech itself is actually appealing. But we'll see. I think we can't answer that second part of the question until we know more about it.
So, I would say, I don't think so much that Nintendo has been talking about NX a lot, as it's just that people have been asking about it a lot.
Yeah.
Because new dedicated hardware is a lot juicier to people than this fitness thing, Because, we don't really know that much about it, and I don't think people are as inquisitive about it. I know they plan to start rolling it out in 2016, so I would think that at one of these upcoming investor meetings, where they, discuss the financial forecast for the next 3 to 6 months to a year or something like that, that we'll start to hear about that slowly. It kind of depends, though, if it launches in the first quarter, like January through March of next year, then we'll definitely hear some solid news by the end of the year, because Nintendo's fiscal year ends on March 31st, so anything that launches before March 31st, they're going to want to talk to investors about pretty soon. But if it's not launching until like summer or fall of next year, then we might not hear anything about it until the springtime.
This is kind of speculation, but bear with me. So, Nintendo said in the past that they're going to try to focus on tailoring their entertainment platforms so they're more appropriate to consumption habits in individual regions. And if you look at when they first released Wii was designed to be this kind of console for everyone. But we noticed a few use patterns emerge from it. You had people of all ages who were getting into Wii Sports. You had traditional Nintendo gamers who were getting into the sequels for GameCube type games. Yeah. And then you had these kinds of retro revivals that, like New Super Mario Brothers, like Donkey Kong Country, that were selling to lapsed Nintendo fans. But you also had this surprising group, which was senior citizens who were buying games like Wii Fit, Wii Sports, and
Big Brain Academy.
Big Brain Academy, using those to be active. And I think what's happening here is, in Japan, there's this phenomenon where the population is aging, which means you're having fewer young people and more older people. And so I think Nintendo is using quality of life as a way to target entertainment at the aging Japan population. It's something that fits their lifestyles because they're aging and they need to start watching their health. But it also gives Nintendo an opportunity to use the things that they did well on Wii, but not have to shove them into their dedicated gaming platforms. So that's what I think is going to happen with quality of life. I think at first you'll see it, a big push in Japan, and maybe if it does well there, you'll see it spread to other regions. But I think it'll start in Japan, and I think that's the pattern it will follow. I don't know when we'll hear about it, probably in 2016 when it's closer to launching. But I think that's what's going to happen.
No, that's great speculation. So our final question for the week, for our first mystery house, comes from Eric. Eric says, you guys have spoken many times about Nintendo's back catalog being one of their greatest assets, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. It's a shame that they don't spend more time investing in their virtual console. My biggest problem, though, is the number of times that I've paid for games like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. In my opinion, Nintendo needs to take a page from Sony's book. The PS1 back catalog is not nearly as extensive as Nintendo's, but the fact that any older PS1 title is downloadable and playable on all of their current game platforms, PS3, Vita, and PS4, and the save data can be uploaded to the cloud and you can continue your progress wherever you are. This is something that I've been starving for from Nintendo. I bought a copy of some of my favorite retro games on 2 Wii systems due to the inability to transfer purchases to a new system if the old one shorts out, as well as 2 3DSs and my Wii U. Nintendo would win so much profit and so much fan admiration if they united their virtual console across all of their available platforms. I would love to hear from you on this subject as it's one that I have been expecting from Nintendo for much too long. I am so with you that they need to unite their virtual console across their platforms, and the cloud saves thing would especially be amazing. Where I'm not with you is that Nintendo would have a lot of profit on this. They would obviously have a ton of, fans would be ecstatic that they're coming into the 21st century. But
well, I think the profit part was more just directed towards if they had more of their older games available.
Oh, perhaps. Yeah, that could be it. If they had more of their older games available, profit for sure. But if they did unite the virtual console purchases between 3DS and Wii U, they certainly wouldn't get that profit because, they'd be losing out on selling the same games to the same people over and over and over again, especially, if they lose their purchases from an older system. There's still no way to transfer those, my god. But yeah, it's something that every other company does. It's something that Nintendo should have been doing 5 years ago, and I can't imagine why they're not now. I don't think there's any possible argument that anyone could make against your case, Eric.
Believe that is a 2-word argument. Please understand.
Yeah.
I'll say there's reason to be optimistic, just because anytime they talk about upcoming hardware or their upcoming partnership with DNA, Iwata always says, we want you in the future to think of Nintendo as a platform, rather than Wii U and 3DS and NX as platforms. We want you to think of Nintendo as a platform that you can interact with using different devices. So, they're intentionally not revealing too many details, but the hope then, and especially going with other comments he said, where their new hardware should absorb the old architecture, essentially. So, going forward, I think there's some reason to be optimistic that this will happen in the future. Maybe not as well implemented or as universal as it is with Sony, where you can buy almost anything on PS3, PS4, or Vita and have cloud saves and crossplay and things like that, but I think this does sound like something they're trying to focus on with NX.
Yeah, and I will say they're also, with their partnership with DNA, their availability on mobile devices, their new rewards program, this is something that is in their language of their company and their upcoming ventures very consistently. So, Ben is absolutely on the head or on the nail, on the nose, whatever. I'm tired and sick, but
And they did take a first step towards it too in uniting your well, not completely uniting your account, but uniting the funds so that funds you put on your 3DS can apply to your Wii U and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very small step, but it is a step.
And, you know, we know they're going to be uniting the account systems and whatnot, so there is reason to be optimistic.
I'm going to jump in on this subject from the perspective of people who think that 3DS needs to have a lot of the games that are on Wii U, and why I think that's not realistic. The reason why that is because the way Nintendo approaches the Virtual Console is they'll develop an emulator for each individual game on each individual platform it's released on. It's different from Sony's approach, where they develop a one-size-fits-all PS1 emulator for each of their platforms, and every game can just run in that emulator. The problem that this causes for Nintendo when they release games on multiple platforms is they have to develop a 3DS version and a Wii U version of each emulator for each game, which means they're putting development effort each time they release a new game on a platform. And
But that's a mistake.
It is a mistake.
Already.
I agree that is a mistake already. I think this is a mistake that will be fixed, however, with their next platform, where this will no longer be a thing that they're doing. They will have one architecture for which they're developing everything. And the reason why I think that it's unreasonable to think that they'll put a lot of games on 3DS going forward is none of those games, none of the development effort put into those games is going to in any way be forward compatible with future platforms. Whereas it sounds like with Wii U, everything that they're doing will be in some way compatible. They're going to use a similar architecture or an architecture that's compatible. Honestly, I think if you want Virtual Console to be awesome in the future and you want to not have to pay for your games again, ask them to put stuff on Wii U. Don't ask them to put it on 3DS.
Also, buy it on Wii U.
Also, yeah, definitely buy it on Wii U.
The more sales that they have on Wii U, the more they're going to say, hey, we need to work on getting the Wii U stuff to work.
Yeah.
Especially if that means buying Earthbound and Earthbound Beginnings.
Yes, because you'll make Colin happy. I'll definitely, join the bandwagon on the whole, they really do need to offer what people expect from a modern account system, and especially from a modern software ecosystem. They need people to just buy their games, keep them forever, eat the costs it takes to make that happen, because you're going to have satisfied customers that way, and that will get you more money in the long run than selling them the same games twice.
Yeah, very nice. All right, well, that is our final question. So that's all for our final Mystery House. We're going to keep doing more of these as time goes on, of course. So if you want to have your questions read on the show, be sure to email them to colin@gamnesia.com. That's COLIN at gamnesia.com. GAMNESIA. You know how .com is spelled. So everybody, thank you so much for listening. This is the Endo Nintendo Week for today. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to us on iTunes or subscribe on YouTube at Gamnesia TV for bite-sized discussions from the show. And please head to iTunes to leave us a review. It really helps with visibility, so we greatly appreciate it, especially if you have good things to say instead of bad ones. If you have feedback for Nintendo Week, please send it to colin@gamnesia.com. And remember to send in your questions about Nintendo, about our show. We love engaging with you guys, and we read them and talk about them here on the show like we just did, so it's a great way to get involved. Again, that's colin@gamnesia.com. If you can't wait till next week for more of our stuff, you can head to Gamnesia.com to see more gaming news as it happens. Sony, Microsoft, Indie, you name it, and even more Nintendo news that we didn't have the time to discuss on this week's show. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you have another great week.
But it would not make sense to have a multiplayer game. I'm going to re-say that because my wife is cursing in the background.